right, it looks like it's good.
Ooh, microphone and everything. Hi, everybody. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight for our partnership here with AFP, talking about some of the legislative education issues that are coming up. First of all, I want to introduce Pat Blackbird. She is the National Director of Chapters, and she keeps all of us chapter chairs in the country informed about what's happening and how we can be effective leaders. She's joining us ahead of an event tomorrow at the White House that she and I will be attending to celebrate Women's History Month, so I'm pretty excited about that. I'd like to start off our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. If everybody could stand, and our flag is back there. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Right, and I'd like to invite up Melissa Yerk for our Madison Minute.
Hi, my name is Melissa. I chose Benjamin Rush. I've always admired Benjamin Rush. He was one of the first doctors, prominent doctors in our country. He was part of the Revolution. But he had done a lot of, his name is in a lot of hospitals, Rush Presbyterian and around the country. And he was very much a proponent for really reaching out to the populace and treating people, and especially mentally ill patients. But one of his quotes that I really resonate with is, "Freedom can exist only in the society of knowledge. Without learning, men are incapable of knowing their rights." And I think that really encapsulates where we are right now with trying to keep everybody, as many people as possible, educated and learning and open to knowledge.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. All right, and just a bit of housekeeping because this is a chapter meeting. I have the treasurer's report. We sent in $130 for our annual dues. We spent $105 for a booth at the Nokesville Day. That's coming up on May the 17th, so we'll be looking for a sign-up genius to come and help us with that. We also spent $100 for an ad for the Bull Run Republican Women's Fashion Show. They have tickets on sale to that until Friday if anybody wants to join me. We also did $50 for the Prince William County GOP Lincoln Reagan program ad, and we received $23 in dues in March, and we have $628 total left in the bank.
Hi there, everybody, and this is going to be our first speaker for the night. Hiram is a husband, father, and fierce advocate for school choice. For 14 years, he has worked for Americans for Prosperity, and for 4 years, he has sought to work with community partners from all walks of life to help bring about education freedom in the Commonwealth and beyond. While raising a special needs child, he learned rather quickly that a one-size-fits-all approach does not work for each child. He would like to see every child in Virginia have the best chance at education and at life through every option in education available to them. Please welcome Hiram Robinson.
Hey folks, thank you so much. I am going to, if you give me just a second, I'm going to pull down the screen here, and then I'm going to make sure that all the technology is working the way I want, because once I get going, sometimes it's difficult to stop and have to fix the technology. Thank you again for everybody for coming. Yeah, that worked. I know a lot of you, and I'm good friends with a lot of you, and I'm eager to meet all of you. I think that'll be a lot of fun to do. So give me just a second here. let's see if I can get it to turn on now. It worked, I promise, 45 minutes ago. We'll see. While that's warming up there, let me just tell you a little about what my aim is to do tonight. What I'm planning on doing is, I know that probably everybody has heard of Americans for Prosperity. You probably know what we do at the state legislature, the state house, and you probably also know that we often endorse candidates. And so you may have seen our name in the news, you may know a little bit about us, but my goal here really is to show you and to talk about who we are and what we believe about education, what it should look like in the long run. The reason why that's important for you is because if you're going to partner with somebody, we're going to try this again. It's always better to know who they are and what they believe. Because if you don't, yeah, of course, now it's not going to work. Bear with me here. Then it's going to be impossible for you to be able to partner with them. We got some elephants up there for you, and now we're going to try it again. There we go. All right, now it worked. So the first thing you need to know about Americans for Prosperity is we are a 501c4 nonpartisan nonprofit, and it boils down to this. Who we are is we believe that free people are capable of extraordinary things. This is the reason why I love the name that Moms for Liberty has. We feel just like the founders of this country, that free people are capable of things that we can't imagine. And oftentimes government puts things in the way that whether or not they mean to or not, limits their ability to become free. So we partner with you to be able to accomplish the removal of those barriers, or to elect policy champions that are going to have a good shot of clearing the path for free citizens. We want every citizen in the Commonwealth in the United States to have the same prospect. So let's talk a little bit about education. And the first thing I always like to talk about is there should be no more false choices in this conversation. You guys are experts at this, so please shout out the answers as I ask them. What are some of the false choices that you've heard in education? Or maybe, what are some of the things when you've been talking to somebody about education, something that they always shout back at you that just doesn't seem to make sense?
It's going to help rich people send their kids to private school.
Okay, right. So the rich people against the poor people is what they always pit. Can you guys hear me okay? I'm just going to shout. All right, that's better. That's a good one. Any other ones you guys have? Okay, parents versus teachers. Absolutely right. That's another false choice. Is there anything else that they try to make you pick a side on?
Funding public schools
Money,
versus
yeah,
funding choice.
Yeah, right. If you fund the choice, then you're defunding the schools. Or if you're funding the schools, then you're defunding the choice. Which makes no sense, right? What we need to be focused on, instead of some of those false choices, it's not. It's what the conversation is about is a one-size-fits-all approach compared to an individualized approach for each student. We believe that every student should have access to an education regardless of their zip code. Perhaps you live in a great zip code. The Prince William County schools, I'm assuming, are decent depending on where you live. Depending on where you live. But maybe you live in the Virginia Beach area or inner city Richmond area where, we've met moms who, for whatever reason, are working 2 or 3 jobs trying to make things happen for their children. And I'm sorry, but their kids have to go to a specific school because of their zip code, and it's a dead-end school. Perhaps it's a school-to-prison pipeline, which is what my colleague frequently likes to explain. And what are they going to do, right? So clearly a one-size-fits-all does not fit for everybody in the Commonwealth, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen. So what should the purpose of education be? This is another poll the audience. What do you guys think the purpose of educating our children should be? And I know there's opinions, so please let me have them.
You mean beyond educating our children? Learn how to think.
Learn how to think. That's a great one. What were you going to say?
It's educating our children.
Educating our children. Wonderful.
It should just be on the basics of contributing to a great social society. Be able to be contributors to your society.
Contributors to your society. That's wonderful. Anything else?
Reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Okay. All right. Great. The knowledge and skills. I think you guys all have it right. So I'll just click through this PowerPoint and I'll get to the end. Some of the things that I've gotten when I've taught this class outside of Virginia, or maybe such a caring activist community, is, you know, we just want our kids to be able to get into college, right? Or we just want them to be able to get a job. But we think it should, like you guys, we think it should be much more all-encompassing. The school needs to do at least 3 things for their children. The first thing is it needs them to learn who they are. All of us are blessed with unique gifts and talents. All of us have unique interests, right? And we're not all cut from the same cloth. So a school needs to be a place where the children can experiment different things, learn about themselves, the things that they're really good at, the things that they're not so good at, and that's important knowledge to know too. And as they discover themselves, they're going to learn about what really excites them, what gets them out of bed in the morning. What's the thing that really is going to want them to give and dedicate their whole life to for the rest of their life? After they learn those things, or while they're learning those things, they need to learn how to become a learner, right? They need to learn how to learn math, reading, writing, and arithmetic. They need to learn how the knowledge and skills and how to make them really succeed at the things that they want to do. And the last thing I would say is that they need to learn how to apply that, right? I think one of the things I love that you said is we want them to be contributing members of society, and so do they. So we want to make sure that they know how to apply the things that they're really good at and that they learn how to serve other people, and by so doing, help themselves and their own family, right? As long as school can do those 3 things, then it's going to be possible for it to work. And because of that, because each child is different, there needs to be a variety of learning opportunities. We need to give as many different options for our children as possible. And so they deserve a menu of things that they can learn. It needs to be student-centered education rather than administration or system, right? Have you guys heard that moniker? Oh, it's kind of like a phrase before, right? We want to fund students, not systems, and I think that that's absolutely true. The system will get bloated, but if we fund the student, we make sure that the student knows what they're learning, then we're gonna be able to directly affect our kids. Funding right now is a gigantic mess. I don't know anybody on the world who specifically knows how funding works for every single. I think we have general ideas, right? Like 10% comes from the federal government with all the strings attached, although probably not anymore, because it sounds like President Trump handled that one for us, at least partially. But then also it comes from the state funding and the local funding. It's very difficult to find out who gets what in each school system. Very convoluted. And that's why we need to stop funding the system. And lastly, another thing that it needs to help us do, school needs to help the kids do, is prepare for their future life. Like I've said, a lot of the parents before would say that I would teach this class to would say, well, I just need to get them into class. But not every student needs to go to college, right? There needs to be programs in high school or outside of high school where the children can have a chance to experiment other things that make sense for them, right? Like I've heard of shop, absolutely right, or maybe mechanical work. I know in Culpeper there's some work programs that would really help. Welding. Aviation, that's a great one, especially since we live up here so close to Dulles, you guys do. Cybersecurity. These are jobs that are in demand, they're growing, and there's no reason that our kids, if they have an interest for that and they have a natural skill and they learn what they need to do, that they can come out of school without a gigantic debt and be able to, right? Be able to support themselves and a family. Yeah, absolutely. Our society needs these jobs, but we are not preparing our kids for those. I have a little video, and then I'm going to wrap up my little talk because I know you've got to get out, Delegate. But it's not this one. It's this one right here that talks a little bit more about why there is no average student. And to tee it up, this gentleman, Todd Rose, I think is his name. See, whenever I get in front of people, it just my mind freezes. But he partners us with our sister organization, which is called Stand Together. And he's a Harvard professor who flunked out of high school. And he's going to talk a little bit about why having a one-size-fits-all doesn't make any sort of sense based on some brain scans that they've done. So let me make sure that you guys can hear.
There's absolutely no such thing as an average student. Early in my career, I was doing brain imaging, and I would put you in a scanner, scan your brain, scan 20 other people's brains, and then we would just average that together. But what we started seeing was that the individual brain scans that we would get ended up looking almost nothing like the average that came from that group. Every time you look, this is what you found. This big insight was that the average represents nobody. So we have a big problem because we have built an entire education system assuming the average kid exists, that kids know the same things and learn the same way at the same age. They don't. By any measure, this system doesn't work. I know because it failed me. I'm Todd Rose, and I'm the co-founder and president of a think tank called Populous. Prior to that, I was a professor at Harvard. And before that, I was a high school dropout with a 0.9 GPA.
This is Catalyst, a show about the change makers tackling our biggest problems.
We've built all of our society around the idea that there is an average person. I mean, everything from product design to body size to IQ tests to education. Here's the question, how did we get here? In terms of the application of averages, we really have one man to thank for that, and that's Frederick Taylor, the founder of scientific management. He was part of what was called the efficiency movement. He thought that the way to prosperity was to forget individuals and take control away from workers and put it in the hands of a select few of the most intelligent people. And he goes about implementing that in factory after factory after factory. And then the early pioneers of our modern education system, they said, well, wait a minute, if it works in business, why wouldn't it work in schools? We adopted a one-size-fits-all system based on the idea that fast equals smart and slow equals dumb. We're even going to use bells that were originally meant to signal shift changes in factories to move kids from room to room. And that's how close our schools mirror the industrial factory. And as long as they don't fail, they actually move on. It's not based on mastering the material, it's based on not failing. The consequences of one-size-fits-all learning, let's just take something like student engagement. Kids are the most engaged when they're in kindergarten. By 5th grade, 26% of students are disengaged. That number goes to 55% by the time they're in 8th grade. And by the time they are high school seniors, 66% of students are disengaged in their learning. This system is wasting so much talent and potential contribution. I'm obsessed with what we call dark horses, the people that end up being objectively successful in society, but they fail in the existing system or it doesn't fit them well and they have to kind of go around it. My go-to story for this is Norman Borlaug. He is conservatively estimated to have saved 1 billion people's lives. A lot of people know that story. What they don't know is how close we came to losing Norman Borlaug's contribution.
I grew up on a small farm, but life was not always easy.
He barely got into high school, and then he decided maybe I should go to college. And so he saves up every penny he has, his family chips in, and it just so happens it's the first year that we implement a standardized test as a selection tool. And Norman Borlaug was about as good at standardized tests as I am, which is to say not very good. He doesn't meet the criteria, and they reject him. That could have been the end of the story for Norman Borlaug. But as luck may have it, we had just invented junior colleges. By the skin of his teeth, he gets to go there. It turns out he's really smart. And what does Norman Borlaug accomplish? He literally invented new types of wheat that were drought resistant, some other things, in a time when our elites literally said, Mexico and India are going to starve to death, there's nothing you can do. Norman Borlaug created an innovation that saved 1 billion people. But listen, the moral of that story isn't smart people find a way through. The right takeaway from that story is how many Norman Borlaugs have we lost? For every Norman Borlaug, there are countless numbers of people who are equally as talented, who have something to contribute, but for whatever reason have not had that opportunity. Depending on the year, close to 1 million kids drop out of school. 1 million. This is unacceptable loss of talent. There will never be a single right way to do education, but there are are 3 principles that will contribute to a better education for all kids. The first, mastery learning. Kids learn at their own pace and keep going until they reach a high level of achievement. Second, deep flexibility. Not everyone has to do the exact same thing the exact same way. We empower kids by giving them a lot more choice to connect with the things that matter to them. The final thing is divergent outcomes. Success doesn't have to mean one thing. We need our education system to have a much broader view of success. The truth is, human potential is nowhere near as limited as the systems we have put in place assume. If you get this right, and we are this close, it will give us a chance, I promise you, to have a system where all kids thrive, preparing them for meaningful work, whatever that is. And if we can rebuild our education system based on respecting kids' individuality, we will unleash an incredible amount of human potential. There is nothing holding us back, except for the will to do it.
Thanks for watching. To learn more about the Changemakers,
Yeah, you always know when a YouTube video is close to end because it pops up those little videos. But what did you think about that? Any reaction? I always like to show it because you may not agree with us on everything on our perspective, but is there something that you really, and that's okay, right? Like we welcome differing opinions, but is there anything that really stood out to you? Yeah.
I really think that we've lost so many kids fall through the cracks because we aren't thinking of different ways to teach them, because we're only teaching to the test. That's the main focus of public schools is the SOLs, and we got to make sure that they're going to pass the SOLs. And they forget that we've taken away the ability for teachers to be creative in the classroom, because it's just these are the things that they need to learn and memorize, and then they can move on.
Yeah, like just kind of moving them right through the system. Doesn't matter if you're getting it. Yeah, right. Yeah. Did you have?
That, but also the counterpart to that is, and I gotta say it, and I know people don't want to hear it, but there are some lazy teachers. They're like, well, this is the way it's always been done, and so I don't feel the need to think outside of the box. It doesn't really matter if that's the way that child learns and so teach, and that's a good.
Right. So we need to empower parents to be able to make a decision. Yes. We'll take a couple more, and then I got to pass on.
The system breaks good teachers because the system broke me.
Sure.
And good teachers who do think outside the box and do try to do things differently and go the extra mile to make sure all of her children learn. And they do say their children, I'm sorry, but you know, when they're in your class, you feel like you're responsible for them if you're a good teacher.
Sure.
And the system also breaks teachers.
One more. And I promise this isn't the end. After the meeting, I'll come around and you can tell me everything you think. I promise. Go ahead, Natalie. Say that again. Sorry.
I just said I'll piggyback off Pat that the system breaks good students.
No. Yes.
They fall through the cracks is that they literally suffer blows to their self, right? And they're just not built for the round peg square hole problem.
I agree. How many sleepless nights because they didn't do it exactly the way that the teacher thought it should be done? Yeah. Well, I wanted to share that with you. Now you know a little bit more. When you know who you're partnering with, it's much easier to be able to understand what they're going to do. I really appreciate everything we've ever been able to accomplish together with Moms for Liberty, particularly this chapter. You guys have all been super wonderful to work with, and we love you. Now I'm going to sit down because I know you guys all really came to hear Delegate Lovejoy. He's a wonderful champion on school choice and education freedom, and basically focusing on our kids. And so we were hoping he could give us a little bit of a play-by-play or tell us how things went in the General Assembly this year. You probably have some good updates on what the governor signed recently, because sign day was yesterday, I think, right? And if you don't, that's fine. Okay, all right. So I'm sure that he'll take questions too after, but anyway, we'll turn the time over to him. Thank you so much. You bet, my pleasure.
Forgive me. What is this?
It's supposed to be a camera mic.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I was like, what am I talking about?
Do you want?
No, I've got a loud mouth, so I'll just yell. That's good. Can everybody hear me? Okay, that's good. So, it's always great to be. This is a twofer. It's always great to be with Moms for Liberty. It's always great to be with Americans for Prosperity. So, thank you for making it easy and doing 2 in 1 for me this evening, and getting to come out. So, that's hard to follow, to be honest with you, especially. in the current environment in Richmond, to be completely honest with you. It's kind of like giving news updates from the front, because the current, the current makeup and the philosophical makeup of the General Assembly is not particularly warm and fuzzy with these broad ideas. And to be honest, I think we're mostly playing defense and trying to stop bad legislation that erodes what we have already when it comes to educational freedom and respecting the parents and respecting students, to be completely honest with you. I mean, broadly speaking, I view my role as a delegate and as a legislator as what can I do to help you be successful and your students be successful, whatever path you might choose. So if you want to homeschool your kids, my orientation is what can I do to help you? How can I help you homeschool your children and make that successful for you? If you want to send your kids to private school, how can I make that process easier? How can I make that work for you? And yes, if you want to send your kids to public school, how can I make the public school system a success for you? And I think that's a pretty reasonable place to start. That is not shared by many people in the General Assembly. The public education piece takes up so much oxygen out of the room. I can get into it, but if you want to know the honest truth, the simple truth here is there's money. There's money to be made in the public education sphere. There's a reason why there's momentum to keep things the way they are, from the desks that schools buy, to the textbooks, to the technology, to the food service, to the cleaning products, billions of dollars in this education industrial complex in the United States right now. Tons of money to be made at every level. So if you wanted, the gentleman at the end said the only thing stopping us is our will to do it, and hundreds of billions of dollars at the state, local, and federal level that supports the momentum of the system the way it is. That is what you're up against. You are up against a system that wants to sell textbooks. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but we took Pluto away from being a planet so they could sell the next generation of textbooks and they would be accurate. So you want people, the system wants to sell the next textbook, to sell the next test, I was on the city council here in Manassas. We built a beautiful elementary school, but it was unbelievably expensive. And I asked the folks, why is it so expensive to just build a school these days? And the answer is that's the expectations that people have. It's going to be glass, the chairs are going to be ergonomic, they're going to be wipe friendly, and it's $500 for a student desk. There's money to be made in this entire system. So that is really, at the end of the day, the answer almost always is money. That is almost always what you're fighting. That's almost always what you're going up against. So that doesn't even mention teachers' unions. So right now, the philosophical orientation in the General Assembly is not overly friendly towards most school choice options, and in fact, it's downright detrimental to them. The biggest thing we had this year, which was, I want to say Senate Bill 1301, might have gotten the number wrong, but I was saying some head shake. Is that it?
1031.
1031. I got the numbers right, still all working. So, that was an overt attempt to chip away at parental autonomy and homeschooling in this country, in this Commonwealth. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, I think if you really want to look at some of the philosophy in the General Assembly is so extreme, it's only being tamped down because there just aren't quite enough votes to get the worst of the agenda pushed through. So right now, we're just trying to stop the worst of the stuff. And you're going to see that in the veto session by the governor, 153 bills straight out vetoed, and another 150 have some degree of amendments. Some of those are technical and kind of simple, but some of them are pretty advanced. But the only thing stopping what I would say are, Virginia historically has not excelled at charter schools. We've had our own version the governor's been working with called lab schools. That got taken out of the budget mostly. The one sort of incarnation of charter school we had, the governor wanted a nice chunk of funding for that. That got stripped out of the budget mostly. We're still reviewing his budget amendments. I'm sure to some degree he's putting it back and working on that. And just to give you the sense of where we are, so last night, midnight, was the deadline for vetoes and amendments, and the biggest number of amendments came to the budget itself, 200 amendments to the budget. We're still poring over them, trying to understand them. I'm tap dancing here because I'm not supposed to call out particular things in the General Assembly, so I'm using broad terms, but philosophically, there are those who are going to oppose these amendments. And unfortunately, there's probably enough of them to stop most of the ones that are the most helpful or interesting to this. So right now, we're just trying to draw attention to the bad bills, let people know that they're happening, let them know that they're coming, and hoping that the governor will do his work in vetoing the worst of the worst. But that simply sets us up to a time when perhaps we do not have this governor or a governor who is willing to veto these types of bills. And so that's kind of the nightmare scenario that we're heading towards. So that, I'm trying to think, so, you know, it's not particularly school choice related, but we did pass a ban. I was co-patron on a ban of toxic food additives that are in the school system. So we got that passed, that was unanimous. So we're not gonna have the toxic dyes that are linked to all sorts of terrible things. That was something everyone could jump on board with. Leads you to the next question is, why is it in the food supply to begin with? You know, it's still there, so you still have parents feeding the Fruit Loops that aren't good for students, but at least they're not getting them in schools now. I think probably you'll be seeing some action at the federal level on that. Lots of people, I did a PTA Q&A, and the only question that was asked was, well, what about the Federal Department of Education? That was mentioned earlier this evening. We're watching it, we're monitoring it. I mean, if you read the executive order, it's pretty clear they don't want to disrupt the key functions of those roles. They just want to bring them closer to the state. They want to disperse them to other departments so there's efficiency. If you read the Secretary of Education's statement on it, they echo that. Nothing major can happen really until Congress passes it. It kind of refers back to Congress to really do the real restructuring. So all of the nightmare and naysayers are really just trying to scare people. You know, reading it today, some of my colleagues in the General Assembly, they're saying that this will destroy Virginia education. 10%, you know, it's 10% of the budget. If you ask administrators privately what they think of that 10% of their budget that comes from the federal government versus all the strings that come with it, they'll tell you what they think. They would love to have the money without the strings. And how much money they spend in keeping the records and keeping the information straight to be in compliance with the federal money so they can get the money is mind-boggling. So I'm holding out cautious optimism that, you know, that we will see the programming and the money for the programming remain stable, but bring all those decisions closer to the state. And this is what I'm telling people. I'm much easier to get a hold of than Congress. Your General Assembly is much easier to lobby to than the whole of the federal Congress. You much prefer maybe bringing it even closer. Your city council, your school board, much easier, not always making the decisions you want, but they're at least easier to get a hold of than a lot of the federal and the state stuff. So if you want to change these policies for good and adjust them, you want this stuff brought closer to home. You want it brought closer to the local government. You want it brought closer to the state government. Because you can lock yourself in a room with your delegate representative and your Senate representative and talk to them and engage them. But at the end of the day, there are forces at play that want to keep the institutions going exactly as they are, and it's almost always because of money. And they view it as a threat to that money. And so, on a lot of these issues, these sticky issues that seem to make so much sense to people in a room here today, if you want your legislature, regardless of who controls it, and if you want your governor, regardless of their party, to make these types of changes, you have to start seeing broad public interest and support. It has to be one of those school choice, you have to win the hearts and minds of friends, neighbors, the mass public, and you need to start seeing diversifying education options as one of those top electoral issues. And you need to start seeing people lose elections because they're not making wise choices in this regard. You need to see this become one of those, if you poll people on these issues, they're gonna say, this is probably an 80-20 issue. If you take the 3 bullet points at the end of this thing, who doesn't want diverse education options, even in the public domain for their students? Who doesn't want the opportunity to send their kid to a specialty school if they think that's good for them? If you phrase this stuff and poll on it, it's gonna be a 70-30, 80-20 issue in the hearts and minds of the public. But if you ask them, is it a top 10 issue for you? Probably not, it drops down. And so how do we convince more and more people that this is the way to go so that the pressure is on the General Assembly and the legislature to make some of these decisions? And, because I fear, other than massive majorities of one party or another, it's just the states where this is the most successful, there is a pattern of how their government is structured and who controls it right now. So, stopping short again, getting too deep into those weeds. But I've rambled enough. Happy to answer any questions if I have an answer and take a Q&A. Happy to do that.
Tell us what Governor Youngkin did yesterday.
Well, he did 200 things and I don't know all of them. So, yeah, I mean, we're sort of plotting through it. I will say this, if Governor Youngkin did something really, really good on this, it still is probably not going to make it into the budget. I mean, there are,
Tyler's got some news.
he's got, sure. Do you have a good answer to that question? What do you got? What's a good answer?
I'll tell it after you.
Oh, you're after me.
I'm
Good.
next.
All right, so we're still pouring through it. I know that we were reviewing it today. There's some bits and pieces maybe about some vouchers and some charter money.
We did the lab, the college lab thing. I was trying to look up the
I
numbers.
hope that's been restored. But
Yeah,
again,
it was, and so was the, what did he call them, lag grants or
probably
the tax credit thing?
yeah. For all that, for those to pass, you need 51 votes in the House and 21 votes in the Senate. Highly skeptical if you'll happen. So I think it's probably a message. We will see what will happen. But if there's already talk of passing of not even voting on the 202, simply voting them down in a block and being just done. Like, there's a phenomenon called pass by for the day, which is you don't even hear them. You just say, I'm sorry? Pass by. So there's a phenomenon in parliamentary procedure, it's called pass by for the day. So there's always already some talk of simply saying, we're going to pass by all 202 amendments. What say you? Yay, nay, 51 say yes to that motion, and you don't even talk about these 202 amendments. They just simply go away in 30 seconds. I hope that doesn't happen. I don't think that will lead us to a budget that will, the governor has to sign something. There has to be something signed in the budget, or the original budget simply plays out and $2 billion of surplus is left in the bank for another year, which maybe that's what some folks want. I don't know. But questions? I can talk forever. Yeah.
Are calls and emails effective to change the hearts and minds of some people that we know are not necessarily in favor of these things? They're pretty dead set.
In my opinion, I think that with the current political configuration, it is impossible to pluck off a vote from one side to the other. I think that when you're at 51-49, there is an absoluteness on certain issues. And I don't think you're going to get, because remember 51, so I honestly, on these types of core issues that are exciting, I would struggle to imagine that there are enough phone calls and emails on the planet that can peel off those ones. That is my candid. I think if you had higher majorities, you would actually be able to maybe pluck a few people away, but you would never pluck enough people away to change the outcome. Okay. And right now, there's not enough team, there's not enough buffer on the other side to even get a few people. Right. We only killed one bill last year, and it was because finally on the floor, a bill was killed that came out of committee. It wasn't heard on the floor, and that's because at the end of the day, there was someone on a principle. It was the right to kill yourself bill. The assisted suicide, the right to assisted suicide bill that made it all the way to the floor, out of subcommittee, full committee, made it to the floor. At the last minute, the final vote was pulled because someone did have conscience, and there was not going to be the votes to pass it. But that was one out of 2,000 bills.
They re-refer it back to committee?
It just died. So, and it didn't even come up this year. They knew better to even try it. So that's two sessions, that's 2,000, 3,000 bills once that it has happened, that the human changed their mind to the point where it actually. So I do not think you could pluck somebody off. I mean, we get that question a lot, like, why can't we just change one of their minds? And it is a machine of.
Especially the Democrats.
I didn't say it. Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna get in the weeds a little bit.
Okay.
So in Virginia, under Lovejoy, when I say this for people who don't know this, that culturally responsible instruction remains state law.
Yes.
That for teacher licensing, teachers had to prove a competency in culturally responsive instruction. And I think what happened was Youngkin got in and the VDA slowed down the requirement time. But the law is still there. So how does Trump's executive order on removing equity, all that, which is what culturally responsive instruction is, how does it play into that law? Do you know?
I don't yet. I don't. We're still, the status of some of the executive orders is in some limbo as to whether, I think many of them are going to be challenged and there's going to be stays, and we've already seen that happen. Yeah. And I think a lot of folks are going to be waiting for the court decisions to kind of make sense. So when an executive order is contrary to a set state law, or the state law is contrary to an executive order, I honestly don't know how that would play out, or how that exactly plays out.
And the other reason it's important is because in Virginia, charter schools are required to employ state licensed teachers.
Right.
So charter schools are not the answer for those of us who know what's happening at the school level today, or in education today.
Yeah. There's a lot of work to be done, and unfortunately right now it's very hard to do any of it. But as for so I don't know, we can research and answer for you on that one. The current status of like DEI and cultural competency and all that. I know there were additional bills this year trying to do more cultural competency stuff. Those got vetoed. But
more?
Yeah, I mean every year. Every profession. It's medicine. They're doing cultural competency requirements. It's not just education, but it's in all these other fields. So if you're somebody who's just trying to be a licensed whatever, now more and more is getting added, making it harder and harder to just be a licensed whatever. But we'll look into that. That's a good question. More questions along that vein are going to be coming up about if the state code is in arrears of some kind of executive order. How do we reconcile those two things? And we need a good answer to that. Yeah.
So, I think you're talking about the Dear Colleague letter that the Department of Education issued because of the executive order saying no more DEI. Okay. That they are being sued by, there's two lawsuits, one by the NEA and one by the AFT. So both of the big teachers unions are suing. If you want to track how these lawsuits, all these lawsuits and how they're stacking up against executive orders, there's a good website called justsecurity.org. And of course what they're doing is they're finding liberal courts to file these lawsuits, and they're just, there's no way the Supreme Court's going to take up all these cases.
Right. Well, and I don't know about that, because not every state, in fact, I think Virginia's the only one that has made state law. We were in 2021, that was going to follow.
Right.
But we were the first to actually make state law. So.
And it's also, an executive order can't override, the worst case scenario is you would lose federal funding. So like technically, an executive order doesn't have to wait for federal law. It's not a ban on those things, it's creating a choice. You can have those things, but you lose something, or you can abandon them and keep the things. So that's playing out right now at the university level, where universities are making decisions about DEI and whatnot. How that trickles down to the public education system in K through 12, I'm not entirely certain yet. So I think first you have to prove that that program is DEI. That's like a yes/no question. And then if yes, is it covered by the executive order? And then are we going to lose federal funding if that remains in place? And then you'd have to reconcile state law with it and figure it out. But yeah.
Executive branch and have authority over an executive branch issue like education. Does the supremacy clause that will supersede any state law? So why is there, where does that fall? That's constitutional.
Excellent question. I'm going to tap dance around an answer because I'm not an attorney or a constitutional lawyer, but my suspicion is that an executive order, it would apply if it was passed as a federal law. If there was a federal law that banned DEI in schools, period, then the state would have to comport itself to it. The state law would be nullified. What is happening now isn't a federal law banning DEI in schools, period. What's happening is an executive order saying if you want to keep federal money, you have to abandon your DEI programs. So it's not ordering you to get rid of your DEI programs. It's saying if you want to keep federal money, you have to get rid of your DEI programs. And so at worst, the state would potentially have to make decisions about keeping the DEI programs and keeping federal money or not. So again, the executive order isn't a mandate to stop. It's not overriding something or whatnot. It's forcing us potentially into a choice. So I don't think kind of the scenario you laid out, since it's not an absolute mandate and it's not a federal law, I don't think the supremacy clause would apply on this particular issue. which is probably a good thing in that you don't want the, technically, there will be other presidents than the current president, you don't want them to lead by fiat, and so, there's more of a process. Or constitutional law guessing there, yeah.
Were you involved at all in the tax credit, any of those bills in the House or the Senate? Can you speak to that at all?
I co-patroned, they always die. They either die in committee or elsewhere. I co-patroned, and I'm assuming you're talking about, like, if you want, generally the way it is if you spend money on homeschool supplies, you get a tax credit, or if you do. So the way we've always couched it is if you're a teacher and you buy supplies, you should get a tax credit. If you're a parent buying supplies, you should get a tax credit. If you're a parent sending your kid to a private school, you should get a tax credit. And you include the teacher as well, because teachers do pay money out of their own pockets, and that's kind of a work expense, and that should be applied to as well. I co-patroned one of those bills. I think last session they died in subcommittee.
It was Walker who had it this year. Walker.
Yeah, Wendell. Yeah, so this is a good thing. It's going to sound like a bad thing, but it is a good thing. The General Assembly is set up to not pass legislation. The way the state government works, this is all the way back to Jefferson, it is designed to make it very hard for something to become a law. And the first step of that is you have to get through a subcommittee, then you have to get through the full committee, then you have to get through the floor of the House, then you have to do it again in the Senate, and then you have to have the governor sign it. So there are so many stopgaps to stop a bill from becoming a law.
In a short amount of time.
In a very short amount of time. So there's so many stopgaps. It is designed for laws not to pass. All the way back to the original design of the of Virginia was for laws to be thoughtful and incremental and populist, for things to be largely, approved upon by a large group of people. So it is not hard to kill a bill. Well, that's the moral of the story. And this session, a newish tool was used, and it was really not to docket them. If it was a bill that people didn't want subcommittee members to have to face a vote on, they just didn't docket it. It didn't even get heard. It didn't get heard at all. We saw that with Sage's law, which is
pocket veto.
Yeah, it's a pocket veto by the Speaker of the House. Sage's law, which was to require the reporting of gender identity issues in the schools, required they would get to be reported to the parents. Very clever amendment from the governor, where he has slipped it in to a bill that passed the House and the Senate and went to the governor, and he slipped in language that is somewhat likened to a Sage's law, which requires school reporting of gender identity issues. And they're going to lose their mind. It's going to be nuts to see how that plays out. So that was a very clever thing that our governor did to kind of put that in. Yeah, you had your hand up.
This might be not a lawyer influence question, but has anyone tried to employ themselves by their own LLC as a teacher to exploit this whole teachers can get a break?
They should. Not to my knowledge, but they should, and I think that would be smart. And I would find a way. If I were spending thousands of dollars of my teacher's salary on school supplies for the school on my own, I would find a way to write it off something.
You'd have to get audited to even have it play out.
I'm not a tax
I wouldn't
attorney,
risk
I'm not
it,
an attorney, I wouldn't, whatever,
no-
but yeah, if you're...
There's no documentation to take it.
And I think there's a way, I think there's a way to write off unreimbursed corporate expenses, business expenses, and so hopefully teachers use that. But that's mostly federal, and really, tax advice, constitutional law, what else we got?
We have some very smart people in this room who have a lot of great questions.
That's a very good question.
Yes.
Very good question. I wish I had more positive things to report. I go back to, we have to have more philosophically aligned people in all branches of government and the executive, and we have to make it so untenable to vote against these ideas that people will lose elections if they don't get on board with it. And that's hard. It is very hard to convince parents and the public in general that the hundreds of billions of dollars we're spending can be spent differently. We all have a story, most of us have a story, of a teacher who really positively impacted our lives, or a really great moment in our school experience. And that is exploited against us to argue that the system should not change, because we don't want to disrupt those teachers' lives, and we don't want to disrupt that system. And that's unfortunate, because for the money that we're spending and the outcomes that we're getting, I'm somewhat agnostic. However you want to teach, as long as it gets good outcomes that are happy with you and your family, let's find a way to make it work. Let's experiment. Let's try things. Let's get it wrong. Let's fail on occasion, and fine, learn our lesson and come back to it. But the fact that we are unwilling to try, and what galls me is, again, I was a local elected, and the answer from the school system is always education is hard to change. It's a big ship, little rudder, hard to turn. You know what? They managed to turn the entire education system on in a matter of weeks and months was COVID. They proved to us that if they really wanted to and really had to, you could completely change the way education works. And they did it in a few weeks and in a few months. And so I know now, we all know now, that you can do big, drastic, interesting things in the education sphere like that, if you really, really want to and if the will is there. So I appreciate your time and your energy, and thank you so much. I have a commitment with my wife to have dinner, and so I am going to go do that.
All right.
But I
Thank you so
appreciate
much for
everybody this
coming out.
evening. Thank you all so much. Reach out if you need any assistance.
I was gonna ask if you want to reach out, could we just call I think there's a website, and we just call your office?
Call me, email me, it's great. Oh, yeah,
All right, so we have one more speaker this evening. Ty Turner is here with us tonight. He is a devoted husband and father. He's the Grassroots Engagement Director for Virginia in the Lynchburg and Roanoke region, and he's been a great partner to Moms for Liberty. He keeps all of us updated on what's happening in Richmond, provides us with calls to action, different emails, different phone calls that we can be making. He's there for us when we do go down to Richmond to tell us, this is who you need to go talk to, this is the bill that you need to talk to them about. And so it's really helped us navigate the new realm that we're trying to step into, which is the legislative branch. So thank you so much. Tyler.
Thanks, guys. So a little background first of my experience with Moms for Liberty. So when I started getting involved in politics back in 2018 in my home state of Minnesota, sorry, you can hear my accent. All these ladies who were really involved with what was happening with the schools, especially during the COVID, the lockdowns, the mandates, they all became activists with me. And then when Moms for Liberty kind of got kicked off, they all became chapter chairs up in the Minnesota area. So when I moved out to Virginia, I'm like, where are the Moms for Liberty chairs? So then I just started sending emails around, was able to get some good connections. Amy Sneed lives down in the Bedford area with me. She's no longer a chair. She works at Standing for Freedom Center, but I'm thankful for all the great work you guys do. You're passionate, you're fighters. You take a lot of bullets, and I think anyone that takes a lot of bullets is worthy of being praised, because we went through a lot over the last 4 or 5 years, and eventually I think had the ship in the right direction. I feel good. So and thank you for Moms for Liberty for fighting that good battle. So round of applause. I also do want to thank President Trump for following through with your campaign promise. You said you were going to eliminate the dismantle the Department of Education, and he did that. And if every politician did what they said, I think we'd have less animus towards them. And so I appreciate him doing that. Obviously, for it to be actually eliminated full time, absolutely abolished, that has to be done by Congress. Hopefully that gets done. Let's pray for them to have the courage, the moral courage to make that happen. When it comes to education choice, this issue I'm very passionate about for the reasons I just mentioned. There's many of the reasons why I got involved. But my own story, I never spent a day, and I'm going to say something that might offend some people, but I hope it doesn't. Never spent a day in a government school. I was home educated in Minnesota from the time I was a 5-year-old child. And back when I was home educated, I'm 41 years old now, very few people were home educated. I was the only kid in rural Minnesota. I was raised about an hour and a half outside of the Twin Cities area that was homeschooled. Back then I was like, what are you doing, Mom and Dad? And I remember my mom saying, they're indoctrinating people in those schools, therefore you cannot go to them. So I was raised under what was, I guess, what is now a modern narrative. I was raised back in my youth under the same narrative. I appreciate my mom for that. Many times during that time in my life, I'm like, I want to go to school. But now that I look back, it created a different learning pattern in myself that I appreciate, and I think all my siblings do too, to a certain extent. And that's why, for one, I'm passionate about different forms of education. I also have 4 children, and I homeschool 2 of them, and I private school my youngest child. And I hope to continue that. I think my wife's trying to say it's getting too difficult for us, just trying to push them all to private school. But we'll see who wins this battle. But with my job, I have the ability to also homeschool my children. So I'm very passionate about different forms of education, and I think it is the pathway moving forward when it comes to education. Since 2022, I'm doing these statistics off the top of my head, so I hope I'm correct. 12 states have passed universal school choice. You have states like Florida, you have states like North Carolina, and Tennessee, and Arkansas, and Utah, and Iowa, and there's a few, Arizona, that have passed robust universal school choice. What is school choice? There's different layers to it. You have ESAs, which is education savings accounts, which the state portion of funding is able to be accessed by the parents to pay for a child's private school tuition. There's also personal tax credits. Lovejoy talks a little bit about that. That was the main thing that we advocated for. So that means if you pay $5,000 for your child's private school tuition, you would get reimbursed for the $5,000. If you $3,000 to homeschool your child, you would get $3,000 in reimbursement. That is a more simplistic education choice option. You also have a education choice program, small, in place in the state of Virginia. It's the EISTC Tax Credit Scholarship Program. It has been there for about 4 years. There is 4,400 kids in the state of Virginia that are accessing it. It does have a sunset, and next, I might be wrong about this, but I think it's in 2027, that could actually be done. And more than likely, because Delegate Mark Early tried to increase the sunset, it was eliminated. His bill was killed in committee. So therefore, if the elections don't turn out the way we want, the very small, minuscule education choice program that we have in the state of Virginia will no longer probably be there. And Virginia, while the education report from the Heritage Foundation showed not the most negative results when it came to like curriculum transparency, public school efficiency, and test scoring, when it came to education choice, Virginia's number 39. It is the 11th worst state when it comes to education choice. So whether it be education tax credits, ESAs, I didn't even mention charter schools. In the state of Virginia, we only have 7 charter schools. So when it comes to options outside of a parent just being able to homeschool, private school, or, there is not really many charter schools. It is kind of just like dependent upon the individual. There is freedom with that. And actually, I'm going to have Callie Chapello, who is the Government Affairs Director for HEAVE, correct?
Yeah.
I got that right? Okay. She was one of the main advocacy group that opposed the homeschool religious exemption removal in SB 1031, correct?
Yeah, and it became a wholesale attack on all.
So I'm going to have her talk about that because she's the pro. And she did a great job. It got a lot of, grassroots support. Every time you have delegates and senators that it's the number one thing they're speaking on social media, you get Winston Sears, who's running for governor, jump on it. That means when politicians are jumping on it, they know people got their back. And so there is a lot of freedom currently in the state of Virginia when it comes to not having a lot of regulation on homeschooling. So in that avenue, Virginia does have some good things when it comes to education. It is more the opportunity for parents to be able to access their financial, for it to be financially feasible for parents. It is really right now, if you cannot afford to homeschool or private school your children, you just can't. And if you would maybe like even an alternative program like a charter school, which a lot of states, like Minnesota where it came from, has 118 charter schools. My kids went to a charter school. Parents are allowed to be school board members. It's a parent-run, most charter schools are parent-run school boards. We don't have that access here. So it's unfortunately, if you do not have the financial means, you just have to send your kids to the local public school, whether it's failing or not. There's also very restrictive lines. You have to pay in some areas, a really high tuition fee to be able to send your kids to a different public school. And in some school districts, they actually do not allow it at all. So there's just not a lot of choice. You better hope you live in a good area, or you better hope you have the money to be able to pay for your child's education. And I think with what we're seeing across this country and the ability of so many states to pass robust education choice programs, there is no reason we can't do it in the state of Virginia. And if you look at recent polling by 50CAN, a group that releases information on Twitter, 60% of Virginians support education choice, with only 29 not supporting it. I don't know, let's do the numbers here. That is 2/3 of people support education choice. So that means this is a winning issue. This is an issue that if you're running for the House of Delegates, if you're running for the governor, you say that I support education choice, and especially because of the decision by the federal government and the president, you now have this issue back in the states. So the power is in us, in the hands of our legislators, to do something about it, and people want it. So when we're going out there and we're talking to people about the 2025 elections, you tell them who is not supporting it. And I know that they beat around the bush. The Democrats don't support any education choice. Actually, Democrats don't support any good ideas. And I will say that. Unlike most people, they don't. When they start supporting good ideas, then I will say, oh, good for them. They don't support any good ideas, and they do not support education choice. I've never seen a Democrat in the state of Virginia support education choice. So if you're watching and you're going to vote, you're going to support it, or we're going to fire you. And this is an issue that when you're running, I want our governor, our lieutenant governor, our attorney general, not that the attorney general matters that much, but it'll all down ticket, but your delegate, your senator to say, we are going to pass robust school choice policy in the state of Virginia. We are going to empower parents, and that is what we're doing, and we have the power now because of the federal government. They had the power before, but you can kind of lean on that decision to say, the power's back in our hands, so we're going to do something about it. I do have a call to action from everyone here. Governor Youngkin is going to demand that $25 million of the surplus goes back to education, and he's going to he wants to put it in the Virginia Opportunity Scholarship Program. That would fund, so I'm looking at the data here. Sorry, I didn't have a PowerPoint, I didn't feel like doing it. I believe that would it would probably fund about around 5,000 students at about $5,000 per year, and it is aimed at low-income students. So students that are 200% under the poverty line. For example, a family of 4 that's making about $62,000. But it would be a step in the right direction when it comes to education choice. Like I said, the only thing we have right now is the EISTC tax credit scholarship program. If we're able to have that program and also the Virginia Opportunity Scholarship Grants program, we would at least have 2 different programs that are offering different alternatives to, in this particular instance, to individuals that actually really cannot afford it. They do have to send their kids to the local schools, and in many of these circumstances, those local schools are not living up to expectations because of where they're located. So this would be a step in the right direction. I would encourage everyone here to go on social media and say, we encourage you, Governor Youngkin, to put into the budget the Virginia Opportunity Scholarship Program, because this will make a major difference when it comes to giving kids that normally would not have the opportunity for a better education, the opportunity.
And you post all that stuff, don't you, Tyler?
What'd you say?
It's in there. It's in this budget.
You post all that stuff, we can still.
Yeah. You mean on my social media?
Social media.
I have not posted that, but I can. And then you guys should just share it.
Just share it.
Yeah. And yeah, if you want to follow me, I have 2 different pages. Live AFP Lynchburg. Oh, by the way, did I tell you that I'm not from the area? I'm from Lynchburg. So I'm actually the regional director there, but I'll go anywhere in the state of Virginia to talk about education. I was so passionate about it, they decided I was supposed to be just hanging out there at Liberty University, where I attended, by the way, and they're like, no, you can go anywhere in Virginia and push the message of education choice. And I'm like, okay, we need all of us. And especially when it comes to this election, where I live, they're going to vote Republican and they would pass school choice. I need you guys in this area. We need to get conservatives elected so that we can get it done. Virginia Beach, Richmond area, and those are the areas that when you look at the people that would be impacted the most by having better education choice policy, it would be in areas that specifically, like you think of Richmond City, you think of the Hampton Roads, you think of some of these areas where, but even like Southwest Virginia, where there's really rural schools that probably don't get quite the kind of education programs that other school areas get, those areas would really, really benefit from having education choice opportunities. So I need every single person to be involved. Once again, we encourage the governor to put that in the budget, to get that across the finish line, and to be able to pass that. I think for the most part, when I think of this movement across the nation, like I said, over the last couple of years, we have passed education choice in about a fourth of the states, and I think the ball is just going to keep on rolling in the right direction, especially with this recent decision. We have not done it in Virginia, but I have hope for the future. I have hope that in the future, we're going to be able to pass education tax credits. You know, we're going to have the education scholarship grants. We're going to continue to, I'm trying to think of the word. So it's a sunset on the tax credit for the EISTC. That would be pass it back.
Reinstate.
Reinstate, there you go. There you go. So we're going to reinstate the ISTC, and then also I would like to adopt more charter schools. I have been thinking about getting some kind of aligned message across the board, across the state, but I would like us to address, and that's actually done on the local levels.
We need to change the state laws.
Yeah. Because right now it's actually local jurisdictions that are the ones that put charter schools. And I believe, you seem like you know this, isn't it? It's actually, it has to be like 3 of them that have to agree, right?
It has to, so it's basically, the best way to say it is like, it's as if you're Burger King and you have to get McDonald's permission to build next door. So you have to get the local school's jurisdiction is the one who grants you your charter, but you're with their competition and you're taking their per pupil revenue, and you're taking their teachers.
So I think isn't it normally how it's done? It's like if it's one, like a county here, city here, county here, that 3 of them come together and then vote as a block, and then they all adopt it.
It can depend on the location.
Okay. That's how they parsed it I was at the VSBA, their summit, and they parsed it as regional charters are done through like a block.
Oh, if it's a regional, because it's a regional.
Okay. So the other one would not be a regional.
Like a county, like in Loudon County.
Like independently. Yeah, I think that's extremely difficult.
Yeah,
I think
really
we
hard.
only have regional charters here, right?
We have one in Loudon.
Is it a regional charter or is it? Oh,
No, it's just
okay.
by Loudon. It was just chartered by Loudon.
Oh, okay.
And it was brutal.
Brutal to get it done? Yeah, okay. But anyways, when it comes to charter school expansion, that's number 1. Passing education tax credits would be a big one.
Yep.
And then continuing EICC, and hopefully he's able to adopt the education opportunity scholarship grant, which probably more than likely would have a sunset on that too. So a lot of this even dependent long term is on the makeup of the legislature. But at the same time, I'm going to be optimistic about it, and if it continues to be done, state after state after state, at some point, this will unquestionably impact the demographics of that state. Because parents, why would you live in Virginia when you can go right to North Carolina and get a universal tax credit? Why would you live in Maryland when you can go right over to Maryland? Maryland. You can go right over to Tennessee or go West Virginia, another state that has it. You're going to eventually just have an exodus of people from blue states to red states based on this issue alone. And when this is an issue that is winning in a state like Virginia, and if you go to every single state across the country, this issue's winning. We need to put the pressure on, and you basically, they change it or they lose. And I think at some point, I don't know. I want to. I'm like, at some point they're going to wake up and they're going to stop pushing nonsense. And then I see them, and I'm like, they don't. I'm not optimistic about that. Sorry. Okay, but anyways, but it's just like, like, my goodness, like, you gotta at some point look at the individuals and stop running on men being women. You think, right? But long story short, I'm getting on a beaten path. We need to get education choice done in the state of Virginia. I would like if everyone utilized their social media platforms. I'll probably draft a message and you guys can share it. But without further ado, I do want to allow Callie Chapelow to come up here and talk about SB 1031, because this bill was really, really impactful when it came to grassroots movement, and she did a great job and she rocked it out. So you weren't expecting it to be like it. Yeah. And we tried to help her out as much as we could.
I just have one question for either one of you.
I'll come back. I'll just give
What's
you
the main, they're always talking about how it's going to take funds away from public schools and do private or charter schools. What's the reality there? I mean, what are you talking about the money getting taken away from private schools?
Well, it's double speak.
I mean, not public schools.
So I asked that question again, sorry.
Well, the thing is, you see all the politicians saying that, people complain that if you have private schools or charter schools or choice, you're taking all that money away from, the public school, and you're giving it to that person who's already rich and he's sending their kid to private school and he doesn't need that money. I mean, like, what is the real story?
It's kind of double speak, because when you listen to their budget hearings, and almost any school board, they talk about how they're operating at a deficit per pupil and they need more money. And in the county, or in Virginia, the Board of Supervisors authorizes just the chunk of money, and then the school board distributes it. So they're always saying, we need more money per pupil. We're at a deficit. But then out of the other side of their mouth, they're saying, we're losing money for every child that goes into homeschool or private school. Well, you can't have both, because if you're actually operating at a deficit per pupil, then you're served by them leaving.
I guess I don't understand, do I still pay taxes for the school, whether my kid goes there or
That's
not?
actually what I was gonna say to you. I'm like, are you getting taxed? Are you paying local taxes?
Property taxes?
How is a charter school and a private school taking money away from them?
Well, charter schools are different. They actually do, whatever the per pupil funding is, they do receive that money in tax money.
Okay, so instead of going to the state-run school, it would go to that charter school for that pupil.
Exactly.
But
Yeah,
I
well,
would
we're
still pay
district run in
taxes.
Virginia. We're district run, but.
So, just to further understand this, there is a per pupil funding in public school.
Yes.
Equation.
Yep.
And I think that's what they're talking about, that the argument against it is that per pupil funding is gonna follow the kid. So if it's $15,000, that
Right.
Gainesville High School is getting, or the Princeton County Schools are getting. It might be a false argument, but that's the argument.
That is their argument, and there are the three layers of money. There's the federal money, which as as I read the executive order, it's just still passing through. But the percentage of the federal DOE budget that goes to K-12 education it's like less than 25%. It's very small.
Per pupil?
No, of their entire budget.
Yeah.
A very small portion is even dedicated to K-12.
Yep.
And it's mostly to like impoverished and special needs programs and things like that. So most education funding comes from the county and then the state. And there are those formulas. And you have your ADM members, your average daily membership numbers. There's the funding formulas for education in Virginia are very complicated.
Probably by design.
Well, and it's because we're a commonwealth, so there's a redistribution. So like Northern Virginia, the Tidewater areas like that, where we have a lot of wealth, we end up in our state funding formula kind of sending money like downstate, whereas like Appalachian areas down there end up, you know,
You
because.
get more state because their localities get less. Like this area would get a lot from the locality.
Right.
So they have a higher locality percentage.
Exactly.
But where, like she said, Appalachia, like let's say Wytheville,
Yeah.
or even like areas outside me, like Nelson County and Campbell County, they do complain because they just do not have a lot of funding when it comes to local funding. So they actually have to ask the state for certain programs. Like I actually had an individual that is the chairman of the Republican Party in Nelson County, and they have a deficit when it comes to special needs funding, and they need to ask the state to put more money in towards special needs funding because they just do not have as much funding in the local area.
But you are mandated to provide services
Yes,
to the children
correct.
enrolled.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that has not been touched at all when it comes to the federal level. I mean, Trump actually came out and said, he specifically mentioned that it's going to still receive funding at the same level, especially for special needs programs. And even when it's been eliminated, he still is creating like little spheres for each portion of funding, specifically stuff like special needs funding. So they're even getting after the Fed. Yes.
Right, and then it'll be up to Congress to appropriate.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
it shouldn't have been underneath the Department of Education to begin with, because it has nothing to do with.
It's an appropriation
Yep.
by a formula.
So is there a concise answer for when you're on our schools also, or in the school board meeting, that you can say that's not true?
Well, you can ask, are you operating in a deficit per child? You know, is that why you're asking for more money? And if you are.
I think the argument of when you allow for the money to follow the child is taking away from public schools.
Well, so in essence, I mean, if you don't get the ADM, so like when a child withdraws and goes to to homeschooling, private schooling, or we have multiple school options, they still lose the average daily membership. They lose funding from those kids.
Okay. So it's a correct
Can I ask a
accusation,
question?
but it's not.
It's definitely a parsnip.
They still
That's what
do.
it
They
says.
still do get some like census funding. Did you want to add something to?
Well, I was just saying, when they say that, you're taking money away from the public school, they're trying to get you to defend a negative kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why?
That's a logical
The public school
fallacy.
should get paid to do nothing?
Yeah.
Why?
The kids out in school.
You shouldn't need to try to even make the argument whether it's taking the money from the public school or not. The argument should be, are we funding that our children to get educated? That's what we're funding. And if the public school is not doing that, then they shouldn't be getting the money.
And actually, with the ESA programs, which we did not pursue that this year, but with the ESA, the education savings accounts, many of those programs actually had a deal in place where the locality would still receive federal and local funds for a specific child, but the state funding would go back to the parent for them to use for private school education. But it was like a 2 to 3 year like sunset on that school still receiving funding and the child not even being in the classroom.
Yeah.
So actually, the ESA program, which Florida, are you from Florida?
There's
Florida and North Carolina.
Okay, Florida, that's what they do.
And I think North Carolina's just got overturned in September, right? Or was that South Carolina?
North Carolina, we have opportunity scholarships,
Yeah.
but we opened it up. So it used to be just for low income, kind of like how you guys are getting started.
Yep.
But then we opened it up, and now, supposedly most all parents can qualify for it. The other thing is with your charter schools, my first job in teaching was in a charter school. I'm gonna age myself. In 1998 was when I got out of college. We had 100 charter schools in North Carolina in 1998. Now we have 211. That's just how backward you guys.
Yeah, I knew North Carolina was really good at charter schools.
And homeschool too.
Even Maryland.
Homeschool in
Yeah.
North Carolina, but North Carolina is not a red. I mean, we have a very liberal executive branch in North Carolina.
That's because they all moved from the north.
Right, we don't have a super majority this year, so, but what I'm telling you is, all these things are willowing, and you guys are on the right path. You just have to get there, and you just have to take it bits at a time. Just like North Carolina started with, a few charter schools, and we just kept picking away at that. The same thing with school choice and, you know, the funding for school choice and things like that. You just have to keep at it, and you've got to keep messaging on it. When you've got over 60% of your population, you know who loves school choice? Democrats. Because where are their kids going to school?
It's redline.
Where are their kids in school? That's why we won this in Florida, is because so many children in Florida, the Democrat politicians wanted to try to stop the funding for school choice. So many of the low-income kids and their voters had kids in those schools. So you've got to keep messaging on it, because you can win this. This is not impossible.
Well, and that was one of the blessings. So I don't know. My favorite scripture is Romans 8:28, which is, in all things God works for the good of those who love Him. So as soon as this attack started, 1031, and it started out as just an attack on religious exemption. So 10% of homeschoolers, roughly in Virginia, we have about 66,000, and then we had division among the ranks saying, oh, just file the paperwork. It's no big deal. It's no big deal. And immediately, I mean, we were united. A whole bunch of groups, you know, came together, and consistent messaging. First of all, our nation was founded on religious liberty, and 36 states have less compelled communication with the government than Virginia. We actually have a lot of compelled communication with our home instruction laws. They're easy to follow, you know, but there is a lot of, so that's why our religious exemption law is so precious and so important to those who hold to it. And so we were steadfast. Nope, an attack on any homeschooler, it's a slippery slope. It's always a slippery slope when it's an infringement on your freedom, always. And sure enough, we held everybody together. The governor came out, he did a rally with us, announced he was vetoing, and then a new version of the bill comes out, and guess what? It's an attack on all homeschoolers. But this is where Romans 8:28 comes in, because now suddenly you've awakened a beast. Now you have, so since 2020, COVID, 42% of people homeschooling were not homeschooling pre-2020. And all these people had no idea. They didn't know the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. And now they do. Now suddenly they value what they had. And now, like, we're a C3. We can't be involved other than saying, what we're saying is exactly echoing what you guys are. Is go visit your delegate, go visit your senator, go be a face, and go show them you care about this, you know?
So I think we covered, does anyone have any more questions? Any more? Go ahead.
Just a couple comments.
Who are you?
Texas is about this close.
Yep.
South Dakota. And then to answer the
Oh,
gentleman's
Illinois.
question, one way that I would respond to is to say, hey, we're focused on funding the students and not the institution. And they help them see that you're just looking at it from a different paradigm than they are.
Okay.
We want to focus, we want to fund students. Students can't wait for the shit to change. They're growing up too fast. So we need to fund them today.
Yep. So this is something, message, tell the governor, get that opportunity scholarship grant done.
It's in his budget.
Yep.
It is.
Yep. And say, we're gonna get it done, and then when we, this upcoming election, let's put the pressure and say this is an issue that we all want. Get out there, convince other people. You need to vote a certain way to get it done, and let's get it done in the state of Virginia. If you have any questions, let me know. I have a Facebook page if you're interested in this, Virginians for Education Choice. I post a lot of good education choice stuff.
You do.
Push your homeschooling thing.
Yeah. I look at your stuff all the time.
Yeah. And so I'll continue to post a lot of stuff. I actually live streaming this event. Feel free to share it. Thank you. Love you all.
All right, so I know it's late, so I just have a couple of calls to action for everybody. We've had so many people showing up to school board meetings lately, and it just warms my heart. It's no longer just me, Chris, Hugo, and Marion sitting there. We've had Melissa there, we've had Martha there. I think you came to one when I wasn't there. I know Carlena's been. So it's been heartwarming to see so many of our members showing up and being there for us.
as everybody knows, there's been a lot of pro-trans speakers at the school board meetings. And so we have a meeting on April the 2nd, and I would ask that you bring a friend this time and that you sign up to speak, or have your daughter sign up to speak about how important it is that they have privacy in their locker rooms and their bathrooms, and that they aren't having to compete against boys on the sports fields. Secondly, find out what district you're in and who your candidates are. You need to tell 10 of your friends about the great parental rights candidates that you have in your district. You need to make a plan to volunteer to support those candidates. It isn't just going to happen by you going, okay, well, I told 10 of my friends. You need to be making phone calls, writing postcards, knocking on doors, showing up to their events, really getting people fired up for these candidates, because if we lose this election, we lose education for our children in the state. You need to make a plan for early voting or voting on our next election day, which is June 17th. It's just around the corner, so we have a short time period to determine who our governor candidate, lieutenant governor candidates are going to be. So, and then I ask that you interact with our social media pages. The more that you're interacting with our social media pages, the more it shows up in people's feeds, the more the word gets out about the things that we're doing. And then if you haven't already signed up to be a member, please sign up, and you can either join up for free or pay to be a voting member. So thank you all. Yes, tell all your friends to come join us. So thank you all for coming out tonight, and I hope you enjoyed the seminar, and thank you AFP for sponsoring this dinner and for really providing a lot of great information for our members. I really appreciate it. So thank you, Todd. Thank you, Hiram.
There's a lot more food, and we've already paid for it, so there's some containers right there. Take some home, please.